So welcome to the next in our series of online messages brought to you by the folks at the Raleigh Congregational Church. This is Reverend Tom Bentley, the pastor. We hope that these messages can help you in your journey of life and faith, particularly during these trying times. If you'd like to know more about the Raleigh Congregational Church and its ministry, there'll be a little bit of information at the end of this video. So peace and best wishes. So grace and peace to you from God, our Creator, and our friend Jesus. After seminary, I wanted to work to change the world for the better, so I decided to go to law school. I was there for about 2.5 years. Halfway into it, I kept asking, what are we trying to do here? It was quite different than some of my seminary studies, and I would be advised by the professors, well, here, Tom, we're going to help you. We're going to teach you to think like a lawyer. My moment of epiphany there was to say, look, I don't really want to think like a lawyer. I want to know how lawyers think. I got to figure that out. But goodbye. Now, there's nothing wrong with the law, and there's nothing wrong with being counsel and an advocate for someone in the court of law. We have codified laws. The capacity at having a complete connection and reconciliation in those contexts, the capacity is minimal. There is always something effectively deficient in the legal structures alone. We need them to be human beings to work together our differences and work out our misunderstandings to a point, but only to a point. The Apostle Paul writes to the Christians at Corinth. He says, just because something is technically legal doesn't mean that it's spiritually appropriate. If I went around doing whatever I thought I could get by with, I'd be a slave to my whims. The physical part of you is not some piece of property belonging to the spiritual part of you. God owns the whole works, so let people see God in and through your body. Paul is trying to help people integrate their behavior with the spiritual grounding they found in Jesus. There's a disconnect. He confronts them. And some people get caught up in the language where he talks about sexual and moral improprieties. That's not the real core issue in this commentary that Paul is offering to these Christians at Corinth, these newly converted Christians. He's trying to invite them to an authenticity of relationship, which is always a hard test for human beings. In the Gospel of John, we have a story about Nathanael, who has a friend, Philip, and Philip wants to introduce Jesus to Nathanael, and eventually does, and Jesus seems to know Nathanael. It says, what's up? And Jesus says, one day long before Philip called you here, I saw you under the fig tree. I saw you under the fig tree. There was something remarkably prescient and wise, and Jesus is seeing Nathanael. He could read his heart and mind from a great distance. And Nathanael gets that and says, Rabbi, and recognizes Jesus as the Messiah he's been looking for. We're invited to go to that space, not simply to have a relationship with Jesus, but to have a relationship with one another. We can't reconcile in this time unless we find our way back to trust. We are grievously wounded in this time of our struggle. On January 6th, the U.S. Capitol was breached, violence happened, and death there too, and we're in a time of what appears to be insurrection. We need to find one another in this time, and it's going to take some hard work. We're going to have to find a way of reconciling our legal, physical possessions and obsessions with this deeper relational connection. Paul is regularly shifting our focus from the morality of what we're doing to actually to the relationships themselves. He sets out a focus so that we can understand that law and freedom work together, but one cannot bear its presence without the existence of the other in balance. And this, he knows that this notion of freedom is wise to the issues of power and confronts the splitting off and compartmentalization, which refuses to let God be God in the fullness of what God's love is, the love that's in everything. We need to be in love with one another again, and we need to do that through finding one another in an honesty which is grounded in a spiritual recognition, where we can see the Christ in each of us. That is the critical way to move forward, and it's hard to have that in specifics, isn't it? What should we do next? Some of that conversation is going to have to be worked out by the lawyers, God bless them. But in the short here, I think we can go back to those words of Abraham Lincoln in his second inaugural address, because the time he lived in is not dissimilar, apparently, than our own. And he talked about this reconciliation and this working out of differences. And we should do this moving forward, he said, with malice toward none, with charity for all. And charity is that word agape love, that connective love. And then he says, with firmness in the right, as God gives us to see the right. Let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds. We need to do that. We've been doing it since the time of Lincoln. And the wounds get constantly ripped apart and the bleeding starts again. We need to reconcile, but we're only going to do that if we reconcile in the context of mutual recognition, but also mutual accountability. That takes a kind of confession, that honesty, that is the grounding of and the foundation of honesty, true honesty. And so I confess, these last few years I've been in a rage. I've been angry. I have been wishing many people lots of ill will and even harm in my heart, as I've seen so much terrible stuff happening in the name of what? Freedom? I don't get it. We need to understand that if we're looking for the truth, it isn't just facts, it isn't just what's argued in court, but it is what's sincerely connected in our mutual responsibility and our mutual experiences. Those we need to share more about. Those we need to put on the table. This is threatening. This is much more threatening than being sued in a court for something we've done or haven't done or whatever. Let's be real with each other. We're not going to get this thing fixed until we really are. And I suggest that the counsel of Jesus, as sometimes different as it may seem, is functionally right on and inspired by some of these words that we read elsewhere in the New Testament than the Gospels themselves. We can find some guidance about how to be true to each other. But we need to be firm in the right as God gives us to see the right. There is an accuracy here which we need to use to deprogram what is clearly delusion. We can do that lovingly with each other, but we need to meet each other where we are. So I confess about not wanting to do that very often with some people I've seen pass me by on the media and even pass me by on the streets. Seeking that forgiveness and hopefully greater communication. I think we have to realize that we live in a republic where we look to representatives to bear our thoughts. It's not just ourselves alone. And we need to trust one another, our representatives, and ultimately our own fellow citizens. We need to trust one another, and we're only going to do that through being honest with one another in our churches, in our workspaces, in our schools, in the place where we go and engage each other in more than a cursory way. That's where the honesty can be built. And I do believe that by building that honesty, that foundation will grow stronger and the truth will come out. because, as the great Battle Hymn of the Republic says, God's truth is marching on, bringing us along with it. Can we get in the parade here? It's not a parade of lament. It's a parade of celebration that we can be truly human beings together if we can only turn and truly offer one another sacramentally in this honesty that Jesus invites. In his name, amen. So thank you for spending time with us. If you'd like to know more about the work and ministry of the First Congregational Church of Rowley, you can go online at firstchurchrowley.org. If you'd like to send a gift to help with this ministry, you can do so by going online at the website, or you can send the gift to 175 Main Street, P.O. Box 364, Rowley, Massachusetts, 01969. And of course, we'd always like to hear from you. Please call us anytime at 978-948-3993. So, peace and best wishes in your journey. Goodbye.